Hi, and welcome to meetrabbits.org. It's been requested that I give a tour of my rabbitry, of my rabbit room. So let's have at it. Should be a pretty quick tour. It's not a huge facility. I wouldn't even really call it a facility. We're backyard meat rabbit breeders. We're breeding mainly just for the home and the family. The more we got into it over the last several years, this has become something I really enjoy, and I've found a great number of benefits and advantages to rabbits. Especially, I would even say rabbits over chickens. There is a video about that, about why we've chosen now to exclusively raise rabbits and just not even bother with chickens at all. But that's another video for another day. It does exist. Please go search it out. So let's take a look around my rabbitry. So this is my rabbit room. My rabbit room was formerly a cow stable in our attached barn, attached to our 1901 farmhouse. So we did keep a backyard milk cow for quite a while. As the kids grew up and out, that was just more milk and more input for what we were using. It just wasn't efficient anymore. And we did decide, combined with personal reasons, to let the cows go. And this became the place for the rabbits over time. So I haven't done a lot to modify the room itself. I've worked within the room, but the room happens to work really well for me. It's really nice for me that it's attached to my house. I'm spoiled that way because I am in the northeastern United States. It does get very cold. We can get down to as much as -20. That's not our typical winter weather, but it does happen here. So this is not a heated room. It will never be a heated room. I don't believe that you need to add any heat for rabbits, which is another great advantage of rabbits to me, is that we don't need the heat and utilities to keep them alive and keep them sustainable and keep them producing. You can see I do have light in here. I would not have necessarily put light in here because I was growing rabbits. I might have, because it's convenient. Our days get short this time of year. It's getting dark by 4:30 in the afternoon. But I have the light, so obviously it's nice to have. Again, I'm a little spoiled that way. So when we come into the rabbit room, you can see I do have windows in here. These windows can come out completely. I've just put them in the last week because we started to get some nighttime weather in the teens. And I have 4 does with kits. 2 of the litters are only days old. Now, I'm not actually worried about the fact that the weather is in the teens, that the temperature is low. I'm more worried about the winds that we've had along with it. And the windows are a draft block. They're blocking those winds at night. So, but during the day, we're in the 30s, 40s. And I generally prop them open, put the sticks behind them so that we're not getting, the windows themselves aren't getting smashed. And if it gets warmer than that, which our weather's been so variable even throughout the winter, they will come out. I can just take them out for the day, pop them on the floor. Yeah, spoiled again, I know. But I believe in ventilation and airflow. I believe that cold is fine for rabbits. What's not fine is wind and wet. So this is a situation that keeps them out of the wind and wet and covers those biggest factors. So here, as we walk into the rabbitry, I've got this workbench table that houses some supplies, some hooks up here. Behind it, you can see I've got a calendar. I keep a clipboard where I keep records of individual litters. It usually has the doe and the buck, how many when they were born. And then I have space. I don't track every litter all the time. It depends on what my goals are for that litter. If they're just plain growouts, I might take a few random weights on them. But otherwise, if I'm growing them out because I'm looking for replacement breeders, or I want to sell some, then I might do more often, usually about every 2 to 4 weeks, starting at 6 weeks. And the reason I start at 6 weeks is because this is about the age when they go into grow out cages. The cages all have a tag identifying them, and that way I can keep track of the animal and know that it's the same animal I'm tracking every time. I do keep, just for my own reference, to remind myself when I'm trying to figure out who's good, who's hitting goals, who's at a good weight. This is a rabbit growth rate chart that was made by Alyssa at BHA Rabbitry. You can see that right there. That's just a nice little reference to have, especially if you're new to rabbits and you're still kind of getting going and you want that reference point as you go along and start selecting. I will also provide a link in the article on meetrabbits.com that will take you to this weight tracker, which is one that I developed. I went a little farther out than Alyssa's, but you know, just to give you good ideas of what your target weights should range around, you know, and you can also make your own personal decisions from there. I do keep a calendar. This is my kind of quick reference. So when I breed, anything like that, it goes on the calendar, and then, you know, I can mark out the days. You can see, like, for example, here, the 28th would be the last day that this doe was exposed to the buck. That would be day 28 for her. That would be when the box goes in, that kind of thing. I do keep a scale, not something you have to have, but if I'm going to be tracking weights, I need a way to do that. This is a nice digital scale I got off Amazon. I'll try to leave links to as much of this as I can. It's really nice. I keep this non-skid pad in here because the rabbits don't love the slippery surface. A towel usually just to keep some of the dust off it, but also the towel is handy. I usually keep a couple of old bath towels around. They're handy just to drape over the rabbits, scoop them up without having to do a lot of pinching and pulling on their, say, their scruff and their fur. It's also nice if you have young visitors who want to hold some of the younger kits. Obviously, you know, high likelihood that they can scoot away, or if the kids get scratched, they want to let them go. So I will usually just kind of papoose them up in that before I give it to the kids with the feet in, and that way we avoid all of that. Everybody's safe, everybody's good. So I do have another video as well that will go into a little bit of this stuff more extensively, but there's some other things I keep around here. I have this hair brush, you know, dustpan brush that I keep for knocking down some of the extra fur that gets caught in the cages, especially during molting season, whatever, general cleanup. You might see in a lot of videos, I have a couple of these around. These are just like putty scrapers from the hardware store, and I use those because sometimes in the corners of the cage, especially during molting season, and with does that I have more hay in the cage because there are kits and we're trying to protect those and whatnot. You know, sometimes their poop corner will get blocked up with hay, the holes will plug up, and this lets me scrape it off easily. Wire brush, same thing, kind of helps you clean out those corners a little more. Apple cider vinegar, a couple of uses for that. Primarily it's going into the water for either a nutritional boost, or if I want to take some weight off a rabbit, or I want to, you know, help bring her in for breeding, that kind of thing. Alcohol for some general disinfecting. Mostly, honestly, this gets used on the cage tags that it takes the Sharpie marker and the old dry erase marker off. Just in case I have some sore hocks, I have some Vaseline and some Salve. Honestly, it's not much of a problem here. It was an issue with one or two of the older rabbits, and I believe that was more an age thing, and you know, their skin not being as good as it used to be, and them maybe sitting a little bit too much in one corner, although that's not a big problem because I do have rest mats and I do scrape those down and keep those clean. Some disinfecting wipes if I want to wipe down like the, you know, the scale or anything between rabbits. Zip ties, because zip ties and duct tapes will solve a lot of problems for you, whether it's in your rabbit world or your daily life. Like I said, a lot of this has been gone over in another video, so I won't try and spend too much time there. But, you know, down here, some storage for some extra feed and water cups, extra cage tags if I need to do a new cage tag. These are reusable plastic luggage tag, I believe, from Amazon, but I get great use out of those. A few things like, you know, the VetRx. Now, most of the year this stuff stays out here, but this time of year actually I will be putting this into a caddy and it will go into my mud room that's not far from here, but the reason being that it's going to freeze. None of this is going to do me any good if it's frozen. Some of it would freeze, some of it wouldn't. The Salve wouldn't necessarily freeze, but would be awfully hard and much more difficult to use. And the scale, well, the batteries don't love being out in sub-zero weather. So in the Rabbitry itself, in the main room here, I have 2 banks of cages for growouts. So after the kits come out of the transition cages, they come out into these cages. I usually do 1 per cage. Sometimes I'll do 2 if I have a lot of litters and I need a lot of space. But you know, they're only living here for 12 to 16 weeks. Actually, honestly, more like 6 weeks, because you know, the first 6 weeks or so of their life, they're in the cage with mom. So, you know, these are rotational cages where litters go in and out as we harvest, as they grow. I've just restarted breeding for the year. So the grow out litters, most of them are still in with the moms. The ones that do remain in this cage are from the last couple of litters, and these were some that I held over as breeders or that had some genetics from some of my other animals that I liked and I wanted to keep in the Rabbitry as their parents age out. And also potentially I could sell. I have sold a few of these. I will probably put these up for sale, and if they don't sell, then I will put them in the freezer. And so sure, we're looking at these. I've grown these out to breeding age. Most of these are 24 to 30 weeks old. Some might say, oh my God, like, isn't that too old to eat? No rabbit's too old to eat. If you slow cook it, they're still plenty tender, lots of flavor. And if you don't want to risk that, then just grind it. Everything tastes the same ground. And I love ground rabbit meat. It absorbs the flavors and spices more than probably any other meat. It makes a wonderful product. So this bank here, for all intents and purposes, is a grow-out bank. This is where they would live until they're harvested. This bank is as well. You can see that I've got 12 here and 8 here. So 20 grow-out cages. You don't necessarily need that many. I have more does and bucks than the average person would keep. This bank of 3 that's a little bit separated between everything, this is where the breeding bucks are. I recently had one on the top that I had grown out from these. It did get sold to a family, so which I'm thrilled to help them get into meat rabbits and see somebody else, you know, realizing the benefits and potential of these animals. So right now I have 2 breeding bucks. Do I need to? No, but it's part of my fun playing around with different mixes of rabbits, different genetics. I fell in love with the Californians. They're just sweet, especially the bucks. I think the does are probably a little more standoffish, but that's typical. They're trying to protect their litters and do their thing that they do by nature, and the bucks just don't have as much to lose, so they tend to be a little bit friendlier. My hands are in the cages every day when I'm feeding and watering and caring for the animals, so if they're not friendly as in like run up to you like your dog, they're at least friendly as in, hey, we all get along, no one bites, no one scratches. I'm not going to say you're not going to get scratched. I think every rabbit breeder gets scratched, but that's more, you know, getting in and out of cages, that type of thing. And that's my older New Zealand buck down there. And then we'll come over here to the does. I do keep the bucks a little bit away from the does so that we don't have everybody getting stressed, especially when the bucks are feeling the need to breed or the does are feeling like they need to be bred. The bucks, you know, they will tend to spray and urinate, just boys being boys, which is actually why I'm keeping a little bit of shavings down here. I do have this young buck up here who's obviously starting to feel his oats, and he's been spraying a little bit. So that's just kind of keeping that down, keeping it so it absorbs it. I can sweep it out of here. You know, shavings, this is something that's always in my Rabbitry. Over here, my feed is, I feed pellets and hay. You can see from the hay feeders that are on all the cages. It's in a galvanized can. I just, you know, scoop into this bucket, make my round around the whole Rabbitry when I feed. Good to go, protected from predators. I don't have any rats or anything pooping or peeing in my pellets. Bucket of water. Water's important. You know, broom, just the basics, essentials to keep the place, you know, it's a barn, but moderately clean. So those are my supplies. And like I said, we'll come on over here to the does. talk a little bit about how I keep the does. So I have 4 breeding does. They all have litters of various ages in with them right now. These top 2 were born, these 2 litters were born about 3 days apart. These are about 3 days younger. They are just over 4 weeks old. We've got Holly and Aster. And down here we have Dandelion, who is one of the Californians that I was playing around with those genetics, trying to improve the Californian genetics here. This is a first-time litter for her, and I'm really happy to report that everything went great. She had fall-offs when she was bred. She was actually probably the easiest doe that I bred this fall. You know, it was a little tricky breeding this fall. We had some issues where I didn't see fall-offs, didn't think things were bred, but as I always say, I put the nest boxes in anyway at day 28, and we had 2 litters, which this is never happens to me, but it happened this year. So, you know, take that as you will, and I take it to as an example of showing people that, hey, you know, sometimes things don't always go perfectly or ideally, but this is why we hedge our bets, and we provide them what they need. The worst that can happen is I put in a nest box full of shavings and hay and it doesn't get used, or it turns into a litter box for a few days and it comes out if they don't use it. But fortunately this time it meant breeding. Now I will say that I won't necessarily say there weren't any fall-offs. I didn't see them. There could have been fall-offs, or they could have been bred without a fall-off. It does happen. I won't say it's the most common thing that happens, but it does happen, obviously, because, you know, whether I saw it or not, this litter here and this litter here in that box, they're only about 4 days old, so you can't really see them. I saw no fall-offs, and I always see fall-offs with this doe. So kind of aside, but that's where we're at. So these are the does cages. Every cage has a tag. Every cage in this whole room has a tag. I use dry erase marker on most of it, Sharpie on the top for the stuff that I don't want to lose. And even the Sharpie, and again, the dry erase, if it gets old and gets hard to wipe off, a little bit of alcohol will take it off. So these are just cheap plastic tags, but I can reuse them over and over and over again in here. And I do, even when the rabbits like to be a pain and chew off the zip tie that it came with, I just add another zip tie and we're good to go. So that's that. So we've got the doe cages here, and then up above them are 2 empty cages right now. And what I do is, when I'm weaning, I transition these litters up to this cage, and, you know, the whole litter will come up over the course of, say, 3 days, be moved up to the transition litter cage. They won't stay there for the full time. They'll stay there usually for a couple of weeks before they go out to the grow-out cages in the main room. 2 reasons I do that. One, it keeps the litter together. They come off from mom and up there, and it's a slower transition. That's not the main reason. The main reason is it gives me more space. These kits, when they come out, you know, they'll be a little bigger than this. They'll come out in a week or 2, but they won't be full-grown 8-pound rabbits. So they don't need that space, but it gives me a little more room to play with and a little bit more of a transition, so that if these cages are full, and it has happened, it often, these cages are full, gives me a couple extra weeks. And then as these are working out of these cages, these ones will come from the transition litter and get split up. They will get split up at minimum. They will get split up by sex. I've tried the thing where I keep some bucks together, and, you know, they're fine until they're not. And say much over 12 weeks, they're not necessarily mean to each other, but they're gross. They start peeing on each other's faces, you know, between 12 and 16 weeks, and they're just not nice to keep together. The does, I don't have a problem keeping them together for the amount of time that they're in there, because, you know, they won't reach maturity where they'd start fighting and being much of an issue together until, you know, they're being harvested before that. So, you know, other than that, the other reason that I like to split things up, and you do definitely have other options, is that it reduces the competition for feed. So You know, the more animals you keep together, you're always going to have some competing for feed. You're always going to have some dominant animals. And I'm not just talking rabbits, I'm talking chickens, I'm talking anything. Something's always going to dominate. They're always going to push around the weak one. And someone's going to get pushed out of the feed. And when you're growing meat animals, meat rabbits, that means you're going to be harvesting some that are smaller than others. So this is the way I like to do it. Some people will go from, say, from weaning to like a rabbit tractor situation, or a large grow out pen, or 2 large grow out pens where they might have males in one, females in the other. You know, lots of different ways to do it. Not saying right or wrong. I'm saying people ask to see what my process and my setup is, and this is my process and my setup. So, you know, that's that. This is a good way to go. I would say that, obviously, like I said, I've invested a lot in here, and I've invested more, to be honest, than I need to raise for my family. But I do also have some people interested in meat for natural dog diets, dog food, things like that. So that's part of the reason I grow a little bit more than I need. And part of it is just that, you know, we've made a point of making more use of the rabbit and making it the main meat, supplemented by beef, pork, and chicken that I get from local farms. And not the only meat we eat, but it's taking more of the space in our diet. So just because of the efficiency. And at this point in our lives, we don't want to be growing a lot of different kind of animals. We're down to one. The rabbits are so efficient. This works great for us. And I think financially, it's the most efficient to grow the rabbits and then buy that other stuff, because I can buy less of it. So I don't need to have huge inputs and huge harvest, but, you know, a lot of feed and time goes into those as well. As far as raising beef and stuff, we're on 3 acres, so it's not financially practical for us to raise beef. It doesn't pay because we have to buy in hay because we don't have enough graze. We do have long winters and long springs, you know, large half of the year where there's not really enough graze here anyway, especially if you don't have a huge tract of land. So beef just isn't that efficient. It doesn't pay for us. The rabbits, you know, they pay out much more. And I'm not talking about selling. I'm talking about what they pay for in my grocery bill. Much better than anything, chickens included. So a couple other things, if we want to look around, just a couple other things that are in the Rabbitry over here. I have hay. You don't have to feed hay. If you've got a good quality pellet, that will be enough to sustain them. I like the hay. It helps keep good fiber in their diets, keeps them warm in the winter. Some of the rabbits like it and pound through it. Some of them don't eat much at all, and that's all fine because everybody's got enough pellets to keep them going and keep them growing. But I do have good access to local good farm hay. I do use it, so I've got a bale under there, a bale open, a little bit of storage here for my nest boxes, things like that. Yes, Abe the cat, who we see photobombing us in a lot of these videos. Huh, Abe? And he found some cobweb. You know, I've touched on that subject before also, about whether or not your animals should be in your Rabbitry. I made the decision early on that my cats and dogs, I don't let them harass the animals. They don't, you know, but they do come through here and they are in here, and the rabbits are used to them, and so they're fine with them. I made that decision because, practically speaking, I do keep this door at the end is open most days to increase the ventilation and airflow, so the dogs and cats all have access to here. I'd have a hard time actually finding every little access port. I do know where they are, and I could keep my cats out of here, but it's kind of a lot of vigilance, and honestly, I've just never had a problem. The animals are secure in their cages, so they're secure from them anyway. The only things that I've ever had issues with, I do suspect in the winter that I might have had some mice or rats that got in with cages and pulled out some young kits. That's a tough thing to control, but you know, we do our vermin control, and it's not a huge issue, but there's not a lot you're going to do about that, regardless of how you keep your rabbits, whether they're colonies, cages, things like that. You more need to control the problem. So I think that's it. You know, we'll I hope you'll continue to visit, and we might continue to show you more about what's in the Rabbitry. If you have a question about anything, certainly ask. We're open to respectful comments. I will say that a little of the commentary has gotten a little rude, and you know, we're not really going to deal with trolls, and if we're not for you, then please move along. You know, we will be moderating comments, and when I think that they're getting a little out of control, people will lose privileges. Not everybody, but people will. But you know, I invite you to the website, which is meetrabbits.org. So all of these videos also have accompanying articles, and a lot of the times the articles might give you a few more facts, maybe some things that I forgot to bring up in the video, that sort of thing. We go into more detail. So between the two, I hope the videos and the articles are helping you with your journey with meat rabbits. I want to say, you know, everybody does everything a little differently. Obviously, everybody's home, their setup, their outbuildings, their barns, it's all different. So everybody's going to do things a little different, and everybody's going to find systems that work for them a little better. So, and that's great. That's exactly what you should be doing, is personalizing it. As long as, you know, your animals are well fed, well provided for, and humanely treated, that's all we need. And you know, I will also say this, even though I'm in an indoor setup, I certainly have no problem with people keeping rabbits outside. One of the breeders that I bought my Californians, when I wanted to enhance my Californian genetics, one of the breeders that I bought from, he's totally outside, and he has been breeding rabbits since the 1970s, and he has good, hardy rabbits. You know, they are in raised platforms outside with covered roofs. He takes extra measures if he needs to, if there's severe weather, which is not, you don't usually need to do too much here where we are. But, you know, outside setups are great too. Rabbit houses, any of it, an outdoor garden shed. These rabbits actually started in a garden shed, and then I kind of outgrew my shed space because it was a shared split shed that was half and half with chickens. So, you know, find your way, do your way, all for it. Like I said, people want to see my setup. I love to see other people's setups too, because it does give you good ideas. Maybe you don't embrace every single idea I had. Maybe you do some things differently, but you might pick up on something, you know, an idea or two here and there. So that's it. Like I said, I hope that you will come over to the website. Again, it's meetrabbits.org, and you can leave comments and questions there. We are starting up an sort of an FAQ section, so that if you have specific questions that are common to a lot of newcomers or a lot of rabbit breeders, we'll try and address them there. So thanks for watching, and we hope to continue seeing you around our YouTube and our website.